Everybody joining me right now are two guys that you know. I'll give them a brief introduction. One of them is Panama Orange of internet fame and glory, and the other is Rahul from Alt Investors Hangout, also of internet fame and glory. Guys, how are you guys doing?
Good. How are you going?
I'm good. How are you, Matt?
Doing okay.
This is I think this is the second or third edition or volume or chapter or episode of the Chili D Show. You guys comfortable with the name of my show?
Yep.
Yes. That's very, very comforting.
You can refer to me as either Chili D or the Silver Cobra.
So it sounds like an exciting new high C product aimed at demographics of the youth variety, the Chili D.
Sounds like a hot dog.
A hot dog you can drink.
Sure.
Now,
an energy hot dog you can drink. Yes. Just before you go getting on your newfangled rollerblades and listening to your Walkman CD player.
I think rollerblading was a fad from 1994 to 1997. I don't think they do that anymore.
I remember, speaking of like bubbles and finance, I remember that movie from like 1990, 1991, Prayer of the Roller Boys, which had at least one of the Hames in it. I forgot which Hame.
There's only one Haim, and he's no longer with us.
Okay. It had the dead Haim, and one of the plots in the movie was the U.S. economy collapses and all the money goes to Japan, and they actually take Harvard brick by brick and ship it to Japan and rebuild it. And that was, they did that in Back to the Future too. You remember around that Japan bubble, which never came back, which is a really damning critique of QE just in general. But around that time, Japan was just going to run the world.
Well, the revenge of the Japanese is Satoshi Nakamoto. How's that for a segue? Come on, high five right there. Someone, high five. That was good. Satoshi Nakamoto, quote, Bitcoin progenitor, end quote. And by the way, before we go any further, I have to admit that was the hardest segue you've ever come up with. We went from talking about hot dogs you can drink and rollerblading to the economy. So I give you credit for that, Matt. But then you served it up to me in such an easy fashion that we're just going to get right into the topic number one, which is Bitcoin collapse, absolute collapse. And yet I find that I don't see a lot of Bitcoiners out there. It's kind of like they're all whistling and looking the other way, isn't it? Not a lot of Bitcoiners. I did a video last week. The moment Bitcoins hit 175 or 185, and Panama and I were on a call when this happened, and I went to YouTube, and the only video that day when you search for buy Bitcoins was a rehashed video claiming Bitcoins were at their high and going to keep going higher. Rahul, from the outside, I know you've talked about Bitcoins quite a bit. What do you make of this absolute devastating collapse of Bitcoins?
Well, I remember last year you saw all this media hype, alternative media, and the mainstream media hype. They were talking about it nonstop. Max Kaiser was boasting about it. So I knew back in my mind, after getting burned once, that, hey, you know what? This doesn't make sense why the prices went from a penny to $1,200. And now we saw a drawdown from $1,200 on Mt. Gox, which doesn't exist, to now...
Wait, stop. I have to... if you're going to come on the Chili D Show, one of the rules I have is you're going to keep it real. For example, when you talk about Lindsey Williams, you've got to refer to him as Pastor Lindsey Williams. Don't forget that. I've had to correct Matt many times on that. But Rahul, you're going to refer to it as Magic the Gathering online exchange. I can't let you go with Mt. Gox.
All right, Magic the Gathering online.
So you were saying...
Yes. On Magic the Gathering online, Bitcoins hit an all-time record of, I think it was like $1,243 a Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
and that was more than the price of gold. So I knew that it would be coming crashing down.
I think you did a video on that. I think you might have talked about it. I don't know if it was you or somebody talked about.
I did videos towards the all-time high, said that this doesn't make sense, why the prices are so high. There needs to be a drop below the Max Kaiser pump of...
Yes,
I think
that's right. Yeah, you did say that. Go ahead.
Yeah. So it was like maybe a little above 200, and I said that this is a pump and dump, but he went on the Max Kaiser. I mean, he went on BBC talking about how Bitcoins is awesome. You had Chinese buying, and I said that, hey, you know what? This doesn't make sense. And what I said, and I think you said this and Panama said this as well, a range between 500 and 200 would probably be a decent buying opportunity, even though we all feel that it has no intrinsic value whatsoever, but for whatever reason, all the money piles into Bitcoin.
Well, let me clarify my position on that, and then I'll let Matt go into a little more detail on what his position was. My position was at 900 to 1200 that the volume had not come in yet, and if you're going to get a buying opportunity, you needed capitulation, you needed a bunch of things that had to happen, and in any asset class, whether intrinsic value or not, you needed to see a capitulation and a price devastation of some sort. At that point, I said below 400. Now, when it got below 400, the night that it did that, I did a video with Raw Dog, and it might even have been below 300 that night. And I said, hey, you know, here's a buying opportunity for Bitcoin. Now, I didn't buy any at that time, and it went from like 400 to 600, and I haven't said anything since. So this time, what's different is when it hit 175, I got some Bitcoins when it came down this far. So my history with Bitcoins has been hands off. It's got to collapse, and I did a very clear video on why I thought this was a buying opportunity a week or so ago. My question for Matt is this the bottom, number one? And number two, from both of you, why do you think these things collapsed the way that they did? What do you think happened with what was supposedly gold 2.0? Matt.
Well, firstly with me, my price target, even when it was up around 1200, was sub 100. Now recently I mitigated that because I've seen since the crash that there are so many apps and programs and upstart companies that are making it easier to use it without having to go fire up your desktop. And the amount of money that's gone into making it easier to use and buy, and that, to me, that first point. Second point, you've seen even more of a lack of faith in central banks. I mean, look what happened in China last night. Their market's limit down, 7% drop in one day. The ECB is a train wreck. The U.S. is an absolute joke.
Oh, that can't be right. That can't be right. You can't be right that actually happened in China, because they are going to overtake our economy. How dare you besmirch the Asian market that way? Go ahead.
Well, that's Eastern banking, and remember, we're Westerners, and the Easterners are stronger and smarter, as you learn from every Zero Hedge article and every YouTube channel, that we don't understand the Eastern mindset. It's like this mystical thing that we as Westerners can't even comprehend. So,
you know, I thought was funny. I don't know if you saw me do this video or not, Rahul, but I don't know if you remember this, but a month ago, there was a day where gold went from, let's say, 1150 to 1220 or something like that. It was a big move. And the news of the day was that China had lowered interest rates, which was the exact opposite of why we've been told prices would rise. We were told because it would be converting their currency into some sort of gold-backed deal, and that they were hoarding all this gold. In fact, the thing that causes prices to rise, supposedly, and I got this from the pharmacists, some pharmacists on the web. The reason it made the move was because interest rates rose and dropped in China. So it's funny. What I get, you know what it is, Matt? What it is the yin and the yang. What we believe and what they believe may be just opposite, and we don't understand it. You're right about that.
Well, to finish my the answer to the question, my new price target. I told Ernie Veritimos months ago. We were talking in Skype, like by IM. I'm like, look, if I see a print in Bitcoin of under 200, that's the time to be buying some. And I waited and waited, and it finally broke under 200. I'm like,
well, did you buy any? But did you actually buy any?
Now that surprised. Then I got into there's like 8 different exchanges. What exchange do I deer in the headlights? So I actually ended up not getting any. I guess if I see another flush under 200, I will. Did I miss the buying opportunity of a lifetime? I don't know. I've got other things like precious metals that are in the same category, and I do think if you see gold go up, you're going to see Bitcoin go up. If you see, they're kind of going to trade a bit in tandem, I think, at some point soon. So, but that's the one problem with Bitcoin is we need like the Walmart of Bitcoin to pop up. Well, that's the respected.
But where did the money go, Rahul? Because price targets are one thing, but there's a lot of people out there who have lost an awful lot of money. It's a zero-sum event. You put money into Bitcoin, you take money out. Where did the money go? Furthermore, and I'd love to get your take on this, all of the quote altcoins. How about this? Down 99.9% across the board. Where did the money go? I mean, those things were they're just up in smoke. Billions of dollars have been transferred. Rahul, where did it go?
That's a really good question. Well, you have to remember all the conspiracies behind Bitcoin. Some people say that the CIA created it or a group of elite bankers created it. Whatever the story is, I felt that there were some early buyers in the beginning under $50, and because of this pump and dump situation with some characters we know in the alternative media, one that works on a Russian channel that we all know. So this individual kept on pumping it, and other alternative sites pumped it. And then what ended up happening is you had the dumb money come in after $200, $300. Once they came in, you saw them bragging, just like were bragging at silver at $50 an ounce. And then all of a sudden, I think those individuals who bought early on, they just started dumping to the dumb money. And that's where I think where the money went.
And that right there is a point that needs to be made here, because let's talk about gold for a second, and we'll talk more about gold in a moment. But in this case, if I buy an ounce of gold, I actually have something, or if I buy an ounce of silver, I actually have something with intrinsic value that in reality can be used for everything from a paperweight to you could use it in industry or whatever. So there's an actual thing with value for which the counterparty is always going to give you something for, and you've always got something of value to exchange. Now that's been, as I've been told, that's how it's been for 5,000 years of human history. And it's been used as money. Now with Bitcoin, when you bought a Bitcoin, you gave someone some money that they took the worthless fiat and put in their pocket, and you're left with a number. So it really was a transfer of cash to somebody for whom you might not ever have the ability to get back your money. It might never, ever happen. And so gold versus Bitcoin has never been the right analogy. And with Bitcoins, people have lost literal cash that has gone to money heaven. And the altcoins are even worse. Because with the altcoins, they have dropped from every single one of them, 99%. And all that money is literally just gone. It's gone. It's just completely gone up in smoke. So I ask again, where do you think the money went? Now you say it went into the hands of the people that dumped early. Or they bought early and then dumped. But isn't that, and I'm asking a moral question here, isn't that kind of disgusting? If that's true, that the early adopters dumped into the hands of people, isn't that kind of unseemly? And what about all the silver stackers who are convinced to buy by other silver stackers? You remember I mean, between 900 and 1200, Rahul, you, Matt, and I, others talked about this phenomenon of the, quote, libertarian hard money guy now talking about Bitcoins. I mean, it just seems very unseemly to me.
Yeah, that did seem really, really bizarre. And like you were saying before, the moral question, you have to remember these guys who are in the top elite, the 1% and all that. I mean, these are the same individuals. I mean, I know some people that listen to your channel don't believe in conspiracy theories, but you have to remember the Rothschilds. They funded both sides of the war with the Battle of the Waterloo. So you have these evil individuals in charge. So they're capable of doing anything. I mean, they financed World War I, World War II, if you look at historical evidence. So nothing surprises me. I mean, these guys are ruthless, beyond ruthless.
So your opinion then would be, I think, that if you look at it on the outside and it does seem morally fairly bereft and that it is sort of kind of gross, it wouldn't surprise you that the folks who benefited from it would be anybody, because based on what we've seen for the last 100 years, when it comes to money, morals and money don't mix anyway. And we've seen...
Exactly.
Right, okay. Matt, do you want to add anything else about the Bitcoin deal before we move on to the next topic?
Well, I think the problem with Bitcoin was people were underestimating the ability of people. I mean, there's a reason when you go to the grocery store, you still get stuck behind the elderly person with the checkbook in the the checkout line. And there's a reason, like me at 37, a lot of this Bitcoin, there's this aspect to it where it looks very spurious, unproven in some ways. I mean, I think Bitcoin's, the utilitarian point of Bitcoin is the fact that if you start to see something, whatever country you're in, that there's going to be bank confiscations, shutdowns, bank runs, and you're literally like, okay, I got to get across the border, or I got to get some money across the border. It is a really great way to do that. And it is superior to gold and silver, unless you want to do like a James Bond type thing where you're hiding gold in the wheel of your car and the kind of elaborate smuggling.
Hey, by the way, speaking of James Bond, real quick, I want to. Have you guys watched James Bond movies? Either one of you?
I used to.
Okay.
I've seen maybe like a third of them. I've never been like a huge fan. I mean, the newer ones are better, with the guy who looks like a monkey.
What's his name? What?
What's the name? The guy who played James.
The guy that looks like a monkey. The guy who
looks like a chimp. He's got the head of a chimpanzee. What's his name? The British guy. He's in a bunch of other
You're thinking
movies.
of Daniel Craig.
Yes, okay. Daniel Craig. Proof of Evolution.
He looks like
Daniel
a monkey.
Craig.
I don't know what monkey you're talking about.
I don't know. Says that. Go on like Google. Like the guy I'm not attacking him for it. It's just an objective.
I don't know. I think that's kind of an attack. Rahul, what do you think? Would you want to be called a monkey? I don't know. I think it is an attack. But here's the thing about James Bond movies, and we'll get back to your Bitcoin thing. So by the way, everyone listening, you're listening to the Chili D Show. With me right now, Rahul, Alt Investors Hangout on YouTube, Panama Orange, twitter.com/Panama Orange. The links are on the screen somewhere. I wanted my kids to watch a James Bond movie, and they wanted to watch the new one. I think it's called Skyfall, I think. I haven't seen it yet. But
pretty good. Pretty good movie. Well, not like great, but good.
Well, I looked at a review, and it said it was kind of violent, and I don't know. I didn't want my kids to watch a bunch of violence. I'm not, so I figured, well, I haven't seen that one yet. But I have seen all.
James Bond has never not killed people.
Well, I know, but the kind of violence we see in movies today, a little bit different than the violence we would have seen in movies 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago.
I wouldn't say it's gory. I'd let them watch it.
Okay, I'll tell you what. Maybe you can raise my kids for me. You could, hang out with, and I'll send them out, send them to live with you.
I'd recommend just recording Dr. Phil episodes, like 8-hour blocks, and just
play that around the clock. So, I said, well, we're going to watch the original James Bond, Sean Connery. Now they're like, Sean Connery, who's that? Okay, look, he played
Priceline.com.
No, that you're thinking of William Shatner.
Oh, my bad.
See, look at that. Even you don't know. So anyway, so I said, we're going to watch the original James Bond, and we put in From Russia with Love. It was on Netflix. They had a bunch of these movies. I chose From Russia with Love, an iconic James Bond movie. I mean, I saw it when I was a kid. It was a kind of a classic when I was a kid even, but I thought, man, I want to watch this movie. So we put it on, and 20 minutes into the movie, I look at my kids and go, are y'all as bored as I am? I mean, it was lame. It was cheesy and lame and kind of creepy. James Bond didn't come across so much as suave as he did weird. And like everyone looked like they were a little bit more sweaty than they ought to be, and uncomfortable and tight, and the language was stilted somewhere between the 50s Leave It to Beaver and the 70s Brady Bunch. It was just very weird. The double entendres were strange, and it was all very cartoonish and not very exciting. So we watched 20 minutes and I stopped watching it. Don't know if that has been your experience with those movies, but do you guys ever go back and watch movies that you thought were awesome when you were a kid and then you realize as an adult not so awesome?
I actually haven't done that.
This would be a good time if I'm editing this audio. If I edit this audio, this would be a good time for crickets to be chirping. Okay, so let's get back. Let's get back to what you were saying about.
I don't watch things many. I mean, the most I'll watch a movie is twice if it's really, really good. But there's only like a few exceptions, like if Goodfellas is on, or The Warriors, which I've seen like 8 times. So there's very few films that I'll watch more than twice. Very few. Like I'd say less than 10.
Panama.
So I'm
Panama. As much as I appreciate your commentary there, you cannot save the disaster that I just wrought upon this discussion. I was expecting you guys to rally and say, "Oh yeah, same thing." When I was a kid, I used to watch Scooby-Doo, and now I realize, but that didn't happen. So
I can't remember an age where Scooby-Doo wasn't stupid. I mean, when there was like no age where I'm like, this is horrible. This is garbage.
See, you're making it worse for me because I actually do. I remember when Scooby-Doo wasn't stupid. I actually enjoyed it when I was a kid. So I'm gonna go right, but we'll just forget everything that just happened. Let's go back to you talking about James Bond, gold in the tires of your car, and you're saying that Bitcoins would be a good way to transfer wealth where gold was not.
As far as getting money across the border quickly. Yeah, I mean, and look at the clampdown in Russia. Recently, Russia did a few days ago, shutting down all websites related to Bitcoin. After, of course, Max Kaiser insisting he was going to go on a personal mission to the Kremlin, which is across the street from him, where I presume...
The Kremlin is not across the street from Max Kaiser.
He lives in...
I just imagine Max Kaiser is like his Igor, like he's like in the basement of Vlad of his castle or something.
And Vladimir does not live in a castle.
Well, wouldn't that be appropriate though? If he lived in like some kind of spooky castle on a mountain somewhere.
What were you saying, Rahul, about Max Kaiser and his where he lives?
I thought he lives in Britain.
Well, Britain, Kremlin, right next to each other.
Same thing.
Same thing. So, interesting thing about Bitcoins and Putin. Now, here's a logic puzzle. The same people who love Putin, supposedly love Putin, all these libertarians and all that, they also are the same folks that love Bitcoins. And that Bitcoins are the answer in Gold 2.0. But they also will argue that the reason we know gold is the only real money is because Putin is buying a bunch of gold and getting out of the ruble. That seems like a very odd set of circumstances for folks who both believe Bitcoins are the only answer. Putin, their hero, is locking down Bitcoins, and that gold is the only real money. It sounds like a confusing philosophical problem for people to have.
Isn't it funny that when you go on Zero Hedge, you see banner ads for Russian women who want, want American sugar daddies to buy them, basically, and shouldn't there be banner ads the other way? If these, shouldn't Russians be buying American women if they're so superior and they're really economically stronger than us, and the press is just lying about it? And Russia, you've mentioned this, I've mentioned this. Now, when oil goes down in price, Putin's getting stronger. That's the new line. Putin is gaining power as his oil holdings decrease in value. That's I can't even mentally process that.
Well, there's a lot of these things out there which don't make any sense, and one of the things that doesn't make any sense that I've seen in the news recently, and I give credit to a lot of the gold bugs who are acknowledging this, although they haven't yet come up with an explanation. Gold rising as well as the dollar. The dollar was supposed to collapse, and yet if you look at the dollar index, the dollar index is at multi-year highs. So the euro has been just decimated, and gold rising along with precious metals. Rahul, you're kind of an economist, and you actually aren't just kind of one in the real world. You juggle a lot of numbers. So what do you think is going on with that? Why are metals rising and the dollar rising? Because I thought it was supposed to be the opposite.
Well, the dollar, you have to remember, is a basket of fiat-based currencies. If you look at the composition of the dollar, 57% consists of the euro, and if you look at it, 11% consists of like the yen. I don't know what's going on with the British pound, but it's also 10 to 11%. So you have all these currencies, especially the euro and the yen, that have been decimated since August. Those are the two currencies that I followed. So if those currencies are getting weaker, the dollar and hence gets stronger. But in regards to the price of gold, that's a really interesting situation. You have to remember that gold has been in a bear market for 3 years. You're starting to also see other central banks, or you're starting to see a lot of people lose confidence in what the central planners are doing. And with the decrease in the price of oil, I think a lot of savvy investors, what they're feeling is that something clearly is going to burst out. I mean, you have to remember that the junk bond market financed the oil revolution. So trouble is brewing, and people are feeling that, you know what, we need to get into what we perceive to be safe, and that is the dollar and also precious metals.
Well, what you've just said is an extremely thoughtful and professorial commentary. But Goldbug Silver Stacker, who's waiting for the dollar collapse, hasn't happened, and metals have risen and are rising while the dollar's rising, and at the very least ought to cause some people to question some of the core beliefs they've got, that you have to have the dollar collapse for metals to rise. I talked about this years ago, trying to show people that the correlations between oil and the market there was a conventional wisdom. Oil prices down, the market's going to rise because it means more money for consumers, more money to go buy stuff, more money to pour into these companies, higher earnings, market going to rise. In fact, oil prices down, generally the market's down. Oil prices up, generally the market up. Interest rates down, supposedly good for the market. Well, look at interest rates versus the market. Historically, interest rates come down, the market comes down. Interest rates rise, the market rises. And a lot of these correlations that people just fundamentally think they believe aren't borne out historically. And they're not borne out. And in our own time, you've got the dollar rising and you've got gold and silver rising. And I just think people need to be more reflective about what they believe. Because we could see a situation where bonds, the dollar, the market, precious metals all move in tandem as they did in the Great Depression. People inexplicably making choices that don't seem to make any sense. But and it really gets down to that whole idea of the market staying irrational longer than you can stay solvent. Ultimately, the people that believed in the dollar story, if you're short the dollar and you were long metals, you got crushed. Well, now you had a choice to make. Metals rising and the dollar rising. Should people be piling into metals, Matt, or piling out of the dollar? What should they be doing?
Well, I'll tell you, back this spring, I specifically also talked about a scenario where the dollar could rise and gold and silver could rise at the same time. And I made the point that monetary velocity and the price of metals, like you say, doesn't have to match. You don't need hyperinflation. You don't need more money flowing for metals to go up. You just need some kind of lack of confidence or confidence in the existing financial system to start to wane. And I think we're at that point where there is no safe haven anymore. There is no country, no nation that looks like they have their act together. Not China, not Europe, certainly not the U.S. It is just train wreck, train wreck, train wreck. And the employment data we saw in the U.S., just like a week and a half ago, that was just horrifying. They tried to spin it every possible way, but the statistics on that, let's see, labor participation rate hit a new 38-year low, record 92.9 million not in labor force, average earnings declined 0.2%. Now, the earning thing, you talk about something as far as people getting things wrong. I've had people on CNBC and bulls everywhere tell me earnings are about to rise, their paychecks are about to get fatter. They've told me this for 2 years that any moment now, employment and wages are just going to skyrocket. And we know, Fabian for Liberty, if I've got his name correct, actually did a good 10-minute video that was either on Greg Hunter or the Finance and Liberty channel, but he's talking about automation, and it's only going to get worse. The job situation is not going to get any better. People have this idea, and I see Republicans talking about this now, that, gee, once we get, a Romney or a Jeb back in office, the jobs are just going to reappear. And I'm like, jobs in what category? Do you think they're going to slow down automation? Do you think Jeb or Mitt are going to be standing there on stage with a sledgehammer and one of these touchscreen kiosks that's replacing every customer service job and hit it with a sledgehammer and some kind of demonstration that they're going to reverse automation? People just don't, people are so used to economies being like boomerangs. They go away, they come back. They go away, there's that ebb and flow.
But
there's
you
also
believe,
many periods in human history,
but you believe,
centuries and centuries, where things go down and they stay down.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Your belief is that with respect to the economy, that this time it is different. There's not going to be an up and down. It's just downtown Charlie Brown. So I want to ask.
15 years, yeah. I mean, I'm not saying it's the end of the world. I'm just saying we're going into a period where we've got all these people around. It's in the old days, you'd start a war with the Kaiser or something and send people to go die in trenches. And that's going back thousands of years. You'd start a war and it would just kill half the peasants. Peasants are angry. We'll have these peasants fight these peasants over this river, and literally half of them will be dead from disease and frostbite. And it's harder to kill people with war because with all this modern advanced artillery, you don't have people, running up to each other with bayonets and fighting tooth and nail and then dying because they got a cough. And so there's a weird situation where you have this overflow of people and there's nothing to do with all these people. There's in theory, we should be having public works projects, building roadways, building monorails. The money for that, though, is all tied up. I don't think Lloyd Blankfein is going to go write us big checks to build new train systems and new dams. I could be wrong, but I don't see.
Well, if he was doing God's work, really doing God's work, he might do that. Rahul, Panama's take has been, I think, to be maybe general, but also, I think, accurate, apocalyptic with respect to the economy. What's your take on 2015, where we are? He says this is one of those times in history where it's not coming back. Do you think that the economy is better than reported, not as good as reported? Where are we, and where do you think we're going right now?
Well, obviously, the mainstream media is making the economy look better than what it is right now. We all know that the government statistics are rigged, they're phony, they're fake, and they're saying that, yes, we're going to have wage increases, yes, the middle class is going to get stronger, this and that. They're also boasting about Obamacare, which we know already has many problems as well. And if you want to add into that, they're talking about having an immigration policy change or change in immigration policy, which is not going to help the middle class if you don't have pro-growth policies. So I'm still bearish on the economy. That doesn't mean that the stock market can continue to go higher. We may have the Dow go back to 11,700-ish. That's the level that I'm looking at for the next few years. But maybe 15, 20 years from now, yeah, we could see the stock market go higher. They're going to say the same thing again. They're going to say that corporate earnings are great, this and that. But at the end of the day, automation is going to allow these companies to report higher earnings than what many people are thinking. So that's what I'm thinking about the Dow in the long term. Compared to what Panama's saying. But if you want to look at 2015 in general, I think it's going to be the return of volatility. If you look at the volatility high or the VIX high in 2008, the VIX reached a high around 80. And now we're at 20. Before, in the summer of last year, it was around 10 or 11-ish. So what we see right now going on is central banks are starting to slowly but steadily lose control. Since they're losing control, you're going to see more volatility, and I think 2015 is going to be a great year for traders, but those individuals can't be like the traders who are shorting the Swiss franc. Those guys are going to get burned.
Well, wait, we're going to get burned. Are you referring to the folks that not only got? Interesting, you bring up the Swiss franc. I had a email from Owanda. Did you get that email, Rahul, from Owanda, or either one of you?
No.
I don't know who Owanda is, but is that the latest R&B hit that I'm not aware of? She dated.
No.
That's the.
I haven't heard Owanda's
right?
new fat track. No.
What did you say, Rahul?
That's a forex broker, right?
Yeah, Owanda's a forex broker, but they sent an email, basically telling their customers, and which I got one of these emails that they were okay, and that all the folks who were in the Swiss franc that either had an account blown out or blown up.
They all woke up in a bathtub with ice with one key missing.
That they, as a firm, were going to make sure that the trades were accurate and reflective of real numbers, and that there are going to be people who weren't going to be held to the margin requirements and all sorts of stuff because of the shock. And I think that a lot of people this year, you think, Rahul, if they take the cavalier attitude that you may have on margin with the Swiss franc, as people did, finding out what that trade was like, you think with the market, volatility comes back and can hurt some people because of volatility. But you, on the opposite side of the trade, of one Gregory, Mr. Vegas Manarino, who says that he actually is buying puts on the VIX.
He's buying puts on the VXX. The thing about
on
the VXX,
VXX, excuse me, that's right.
The VXX
That's right.
is that even though he may be thinking that the VIX may go lower, but at the end of the day, the VXX has a problem of decay.
That's right.
So even though he may be wrong about volatility going back down, he could be right on the trade, which sounds crazy.
No, you're right about that.
VIX,
Well, let me be clear. You're right about that. Puts on the VIX different than puts on VXX. So thank you for clarifying that. Go ahead.
right. So, I mean, once again, I could be wrong on the volatility trade, but the way that I'm playing it is just shorting the XIV rather than getting involved in the futures markets. But we shall see how it goes.
For people listening who don't know what the XIV is, you want to explain that?
Yeah, so the XIV is basically shorting the VIX futures contract, I believe, and they changed the composition of it day to day, I believe. So if volatility goes down, you're going to make money if you're long the XIV. But if volatility starts to go up and you're shorting the XIV, which I plan to do every time the VIX has a pullback, then you're most likely going to make money. But once again, with the situation of contango and backwardization, it's subject to wild fluctuations.
Right.
That's the best way of putting it.
So people understand the point about Greg Manarino. He says he's buying puts on the VXX, which because of the decay could end up being a break-even or better trade, even if volatility goes nowhere, simply because of the decay, which we may be getting wonkish and some people don't understand it, but the bottom line is he could be wrong about volatility and right about the trade. Although he could be dramatically wrong about that trade too. If volatility spikes for the next month straight, just day after day of moving up, he could get blown out. So,
right, and also depends on contango and backwardization. So sometimes, like the XIV, sorry to interrupt Panama, but the XIV has been on a tear for the past few years, and people are thinking it'll continue to go up. But now it could be in a situation where, because of contango or backwardization, the XIV may not be going up in a straight line like it did for the past few years. So maybe what's going on with the VIX may happen with the XIV.
Well, I agree with you, and Panama, I will get to your point in a moment. I agree with you in this respect. I would not want to be shorting volatility near multi-generational lows. I just think that I don't know what the stories will be. I don't know what the angle is going to be. I don't know. But the last thing I'd want to do is come in and start shorting that now. I think if it works out, then much respect to Greg Manarino or others, but I just can't. I just don't see it. Matt, what's your take on that?
Well, Manarino's overall take is the Fed is about to do another massive QE program. And I like Manarino. I think he's he's being honest about what he thinks is going to happen, but he's been saying that for a while. That there's going to be this massive, the biggest QE we've ever seen.
Okay, and also to your point there, that was already supposed to have happened. 2014 was supposedly the year of the ramping up the QE, and it did not happen. And so now, yeah, this is the year of the ramping up of the QE. And real quick, let me interject this point. Y'all ever notice that whenever anyone talks about Greg Manarino, they say, I really like the guy. He's a really nice guy, but... I mean, it's just pretty fun. I mean, I think he's a nice guy too, but just so many people couch their conversations about him like are we afraid that Greg Manarino has, gonna strike us down if we don't like him?
Well, maybe some of his fans may go crazy on you.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, I just for the record, Greg, I love you. Anytime you want to come onto the show here, I'm fine. Go ahead, Panama.
Well, he's not the only one. You look on a channel like Finance and Liberty or any of these channels, you'll see 8 gurus in a row insisting the Fed is about to print, Peter Schiff too, the Fed is about to just open the floodgates and they're going to print so much money. But here's the problem with this scenario. And it's like Raw Dog mentioned this because I got him and I am in Skype. The 30-year yield on our 30-year bond yield, it has dropped 40% over the past 12 months. Mm-hmm. It is just, practically nothing right now. If the Fed comes out and pushes that down a little more, why would that send stocks skyrocket? I mean, the idea
that's right.
that
in other words,
Yellen's going to push rates down when they already dropped 40% in a straight line,
right.
And before that they were already low.
Incrementally, and you and I have had that conversation before. Incrementally, there's only so much they can do at this point. And the argument, what's the 30-year at right now? Like 2?
Isn't it like less than 2?
TYX symbol. What you do is go put $sign TYX.
I think it's at 2 or 2.5 or something. Someone can look it up. But there's only so much you can do where you come from 15 or 16, 30 years ago to 2. I mean, the effect of that has got to become more and more nominal as we move forward. So you have to have some other scapegoat. And what's even more interesting about this, to the point about the Fed and printing, and Rahul, will you please explain to people, or as I like to say, splain to people, that the money that QE has brought in is simply shifting on balance sheets of banks toxic assets. They're not dropping money from helicopters. It's not like the money's actually increasing the velocity of money into the economy, which is where you're going to get that inflation. Why don't some of these gurus that Matt talks about, the 8 of them in a row, why doesn't like number 7 or 6 somewhere in there go, hey guys, it's not the same thing?
Well, you have to remember that in order to get views, you need to get these gurus on. So you're not going to have someone like one of us 3 on some of these channels. No disrespect to them, but we don't get as many views as some of the gurus out there. So
hey, now hold on. Now, let me say this. I brought you in Panama on today so I would get some views. You guys are my ace card today. Are you saying that? Are you saying that I should have had on Pastor Jim Willie or Gerald Salente or somebody?
You should have some guy whose name is also has other meanings, but in a.
Hey, did you guys share my interview with Bo Polney?
That was pretty interesting.
I asked him if his name was real. Did you guys catch that?
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah, he didn't. He was non-committal on that. I don't know what to read out of that. Okay, so you're saying that. Okay, so to your point, Rahul, are you saying that the quote gurus who keep preaching this story, they know the truth and just
no. I think they truly believe that situation. I mean, this is what they believe. I mean, there may be some people like G4T that were completely BSing on what they were saying, as you found out through some of your interviews. But what I'm saying is that you're not going to get a contrary voice who may be against what the government or these central planners are doing, but you may not hear a voice like you. That's what I'm trying to say.
I got you. So in other words, what we're talking about, let's just keep it real here. We're talking about reality. Most of these people have their heads up their asses, don't know, and also have no incentive to tell if they did know.
Well, it's the
No,
mainstream.
hold on, wait. I
people
want to
say-
hear if Rahul agrees with me on that. Hold on, Matt. Am I right?
No, I truly think that 80% of the people that are interviewed on these channels, they truly believe what they're saying. And I mean, on the other hand, the rest, the 20%, they're just sales guys.
Okay, well
As
they might believe
identified.
it. Well, they might believe it, but what I'm asking you is that whether they believe it or not, they can believe it all day long. It's not accurate, right? I mean, in other words, just because 80% of them believe the line doesn't make it reality.
Right. So, long story short, when it comes to quantitative easing, what's this doing is just covering the toxic assets on the balance sheet of these banks. And long story short, all this money is just held at the coffers of the Federal Reserve. When you have low interest rates, when you have an anti-business Congress and president in office, you're not going to get the velocity of money to pick up unless you start to go into like $3 trillion of debt a year. If we start to do that, yeah, the velocity is going to pick up. There's going to be a loss of confidence. But we're not at that point right now because we still have the world's reserve currency and everyone else has a lousy situation as well.
Right.
So,
okay. Well, I mean, I just think that the story about quantitative easing, if that's what people like Manarino are banking on, they don't have a fundamental understanding of what's actually taken place. What actually took place was very simple. We were told in 2007 things were fine. Goldilocks economy, economic nirvana, all of that. Bankers went before Congress, said things were fantastic. Then they began to lower interest rates. And why? We got to remember why this. Remember, Kramer said, "Do they got to open the darn discount window?" And why was that? Because the economy, according to, and the market, according to the pundits and the Wall Street types, was about to take off like a scalded donkey only if they lowered interest rates and brought in all the extra liquidity from the sidelines. All that's happened since, lowering of interest rates and then quantitative easing, has simply been a way to take off the balance sheets of banks what TARP was supposed to have done. TARP, of course, went other places. It went into the market. It went around the world in a lot of ways that had nothing to do with anything about increasing the velocity of money here in the States, including $17 trillion in loans that the Fed did in 2008. But none of that had anything to do with the velocity of money. Therefore, if people like Manarino think that quantitative easing this time is different, it'll have to be a different form of quantitative easing where they literally are dropping money from helicopters. Now, am I right about that? For it to be different?
That's true. It would have to be like the Pastor Lindsey Williams scenario where Obama comes out to the podium and hits a button and sends a dollar down 30% in the day. I forgot what that like Obama has a magic lever somewhere he could just pull and just make the dollar go lower.
Wouldn't that be awesome?
It would have to, but it would have to be something not cute. It would have to be something like mailing everyone in the country $1,000 debit cards. Or it would have to be something just insane.
How awesome would that be if, like, his last act, he comes to the podium and he says, "Listen, here's the deal. We literally are honestly sending out envelopes with $20,000 or $30,000 in just printed money. These are brand new, crisp $100 bills, and by executive order, I am sending every citizen $20,000 or $30,000 in cash. Spend it as you want to. Thank you, America. Good night." And he takes his mic and he just drops it and he starts feeding back. He's like, "Peace." He just drops the mic and walks off. He just rips his tie off. "Peace, bitches." Wouldn't that be awesome?
That's the thing. I think a lot of people like Peter Schiff, like Manarino, like 20 other gurus I could name, where their calculation went wrong in monetary velocity is they underestimated how evil...
Whoa, stop.
Whoa. I thought he always talks about there's no velocity before.
Wait, hold on.
That.
Wait, Rahul, hold on. Before you make your point, I've said it to you before, Matt. I'm going to say it to you again. You keep it real here at the Chili.
Said Pastor.
No. You said Pastor Lindsey Williams, but how dare you say that Peter Schiff got something wrong?
He's early. I'm sorry.
That's right. He's early. Come on now.
Early bird.
All right, go ahead.
Early. Okay. They underestimated how evil this new breed of corporations, these glassy-eyed 25-year-old idiots in Silicon Valley, these oligarchs in New York, they underestimated their potential to not want to raise wages, even though they should have like 3 years ago. So that's where the monetary velocity part of the equation, in any sane world, they would be raising wages right now.
That's right. That's right. In a sane world where the economy would actually, where the goal was to actually strengthen the economy and empower the individual and all that, and yeah, that would be a good idea. If you were pro-business, for example, that would be a tremendous idea, but it's not happening. So
it's not even happening in Japan. The Bank of Japan has been begging their companies to raise wages because the yen dropped like 30-40%, and all the companies basically said no. And same thing here in this country. I don't see one CEO coming out to a podium somewhere and saying, we know our stock's going to take a hit, but we have to raise wages. It's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and that's a great point. That's a great point. Go ahead.
So without the increase in wages, you just can't get that velocity no matter what the Fed does, no matter what Yellen says she's going to do.
That's right. And without velocity of money picking up, now I'm going to go to Rahul for this one. Without the velocity of money picking up, then by definition, you really can't have inflation as we currently understand inflation, right? I mean, you can't have the sort of inflation that the inflationistas talk about if people don't have the cash in their pocket to spend. Therefore,
I don't agree with that to a certain extent. I mean, we have this particular situation in that we're the world's reserve currency, and we are in the best position out of all of the other countries that are struggling right now. But for an industrialized country, it's much harder for us to experience inflation when people don't have cash in their pocketbooks.
Well, then what would it take? Then what would it take, given the stories we've been told are going to happen any day now? What will it take to give us the Weimar, the Zimbabwe, the Mike Maloney gold $250 of an ounce scenario? What's it going to take for that?
Well, you'd have to see Congress going into like $3 trillion of debt per year. Right now we're going into like, what is it, a little over $1 trillion of debt, or it's actually less now, maybe like 600 billion. We'd have to be spending like drunken idiots, even though we are acting foolishly right now.
Hold on, explain that to me. Why do you think that adding more debt is going to increase inflation to the hyperinflation mark that you're talking about? Because
people would lose confidence in what the United States is doing.
Hold on, but since George Bush took office until now, 16 years of the debt was doubled once, it's about to double again, and yet we don't see that hyperinflation. So I'm not trying to be, I'm not trying to call you out here. I'm just saying, don't you think you would need more than that? Because that apparently hasn't been the answer yet.
Right. I was just giving you a theoretical situation where we could see it. But the reason, why we don't have it, I mean, under George Bush, we did have the inflation. He had the velocity of money much higher than where it is right now, and that's because he cut taxes, velocity of money picked up. But now we have a depressed economy. I mean, the total credit market debt outstanding is not increasing at all. So, in essence, you have disinflation. And we have the world's reserve currency. So that's why you don't see higher inflation. You also have low interest rates. In order to see the velocity of money pick up, you need much higher interest rates. And until you see higher interest rates like the late 80s.
That's right.
Late 80s, early 80s, late 70s.
Right.
Then you get the inflation.
Which, again, in advance, Rahul has laid the scenario out there that if you listen to what Rahul said in advance, it tracks with what I've said. And I'm going to repeat what I've said. When you see interest rates pick up, and when you see the people who claim that interest rates going down have been what should cause inflation, when you see rates rising and you see more people getting loans and you see wages rising, all those things, I know, Panama, you disagree will ever happen again, as I think Raw Dog feels the same way, that's when you're going to get the inflation. That's when it's going to happen. That's when it takes off. And it'll be when everyone is thinking the other way. They're thinking, oh, well, this is going to tighten the money supply, right? This is a time when metals should really get hammered and the market's going to turn down and all that. No, it's historically not been the case. In fact, it'll be worse next time, because what QE has done is all the garbage that's on those the balance sheets of the Fed now. Now think about this. when they start dumping that, which they're eventually going to do, they're not going to be at fire sale prices, are they? They're not looking to let it go on the cheap. If that was the case, they'd have written that stuff off already. So everything is going to have to be by magnitudes much higher, and that doesn't happen until rates begin to rise. So when do you think that's going to be, Rahul?
Rates?
Yeah.
Well, I would start to see rates later this year. Hills and Rand at the Wall Street Journal is talking about higher interest rates, but now he said that it's going to be later this year. So at the earliest, I would say in the fall of 2015, that's when you start to see rate hikes. It's going to surprise a lot of people in the alternative media if they do start to raise rates, but it's going to most likely be, in my opinion, over a few decades. And by the time of the 100-year anniversary of Bretton Woods, I think it's going to be all stated and done, but it could take a while for the interest rates that we saw in the late.
Remember, this is the Chili D show. Bretton Woods is a term that I'll pretend I don't even know about. So can you explain the significance of that?
Bretton Woods is in New Hampshire, and what happened in 1944, 1945, what ended up happening was the British passed on the baton to the United States government for the world's reserve currency, and they just set up quotas that $1 would be, an ounce of gold would be $35 an ounce, and all these countries would be pegged to the US dollar or gold. And in essence, a fractional reserve gold standard was created.
Gotcha. We can talk more, in an educational series later about what that means. But you're saying that by the time the 100-year anniversary comes around, which is an arbitrary date for that event, you're saying that interest rates will have risen to the point, inflation will have risen to the point, and really the die will be cast at that point. And it almost sounds like a frog in hot water scenario, that it's not going to happen this year, but incrementally over the coming days, weeks, months, and years, and decades, then it will come in, which sort of leads into my belief that we'll see Dow 80,000 in my lifetime, gold 8,000 an ounce, and silver 800 an ounce. That's going to happen.
Something ridiculous.
Something ridiculous. Okay. Now, one more question I got to ask both of y'all.
I didn't get the weigh on that.
I'm sorry. What was that, Matt?
I didn't get the weigh in on the interest rate thing.
I thought I explained your position fairly well, but if you want to pontificate on it, go ahead.
Well, just really quick. The problem is, the exponential rate at which automation is increasing in the customer service job industry, which is a huge percentage of jobs. 10 years from now, the amount of things if you're sick of touchscreen kiosks and self-checkouts now, you wait until 10 years from now when you go to any restaurant, any McDonald's, any store, and that's it. It's touchscreen, it's get your phone out, download our app, and that. We're going to have so many people out of work that we just don't know what to do with. And short of a plague, I'm sure they're working on one. That's going to be the amount of people just sitting there and we don't know what to do with them. You talk about social problems. So
your fundamental case is they can't raise rates. Is that your fundamental case?
Oh, they're going to raise rates. Here's my position on rates. They're going to raise rates at least 0.75%, and they're going to do it as a psychological trick to try and make people think, hey, the economy's getting better. And they have to do this because recently that huge GDP reading, 5%, 2/3 of that was Obamacare spending.
Right.
So if they delay rates, if they do QE whatever again, they basically have to admit, hey, we made up that GDP number. And they can never admit a lie. So they have to go through with the lie they're caught in, raise rates just a little bit, 0.75% or so, and you're not going to see wages go up. You're not going to see, people suddenly who weren't getting loans now. So that's where I disagree.
Okay, so you think it'll be basically a much ado about nothing, a very ceremonial rate increase, but in terms of the infrastructure of this country handing out more cash, under no circumstances do you see that happening?
There just aren't enough stable employed people. There aren't enough people where here's my $40,000 to $50,000 job. Give me that 4-bedroom house over there that you couldn't sell for 6 years. Those jobs are just, and there's been so many charts on the end of that wage level that it's going to be really hard. And that's why, as a country, we do kind of, I know we disagree on the small house thing. People shouldn't be living in little tiny shacks in the backyards of their of their in-laws. Not to bash anyone, but
no, I don't think you're bashing anyone. I'll say it right here. If you go on YouTube and you're explaining to people about the minimalist lifestyle, living in a shed and enjoying the creature comforts while sipping a Starbucks and doing so by taking showers in your mother-in-law's bathrooms or maybe in her backyard with a hose, I don't think that is a fair representation of the minimalist tiny home lifestyle. So I'm not bashing anyone. I'm just telling you, anyone who lives like that is not presenting a real life scenario that would work for most Americans. I'll put it this way.
Speaking of jobs and Americans and like the entertainment industry, of course we know video stores are dead and record stores are dead. And right now, like 95% of the movies in theaters are in full DVD quality in pirate copies online. I don't know if you saw this story, but there was a huge leak of basically every film that's out right now because when people are trying to get Academy Award nominations, they send out DVD screeners and they watermark them and everything, but literally you could see every single movie in the theater right now in full DVD quality on like 1,000 different pirate sites. And that's another thing that's another industry, you know, the working at the movie theater, I know a guy who manages a movie theater. I knew when I was a kid, manages kind of a big theater in Rosemont. And I don't know if you saw the statistics on box office receipts. Yeah, the American Sniper movie did good because Sean Hannity ordered everyone who watches him to go see it, but every other movie a complete
I thought you were going to say because Sean Hannity bought everybody that watches Fox a ticket.
Well, you know, the American Sniper thing, I've got my own problems with that because it bleeds into Katrina and what he says he went to Katrina, went to the roof of the Superdome and shot like 25 people. And I know for a fact that didn't happen because I knew cops who were in the Superdome, in the top level, in the skybox during Katrina. And I know that the Superdome was surrounded by a lake of water and there was no looting outside the Superdome at all.
First of all, wait, hold on. First of all, I have to cut you off real quick. First of all, as we all know, those levees were blown up.
Possibly.
All right. Now, you know, I asked you about, you said you wanted to talk about interest rates. Now we're talking about Katrina, so.
Well,
talking
the
about
point
Chris
is,
Kyle.
the end of the average middle class guy being able to get a piece of the profit, being able to get money in his pocket is part of the economic system. We see like at Amazon, completely automating the warehouses.
Yeah, I mean, I get all of that. Wait, I get all of that, but I'm just like, forgive me for cutting you off because I don't want to cut you off, but I get all of that, but I bet you that if you were to ask people in the 1970s, or ask people in the late 1990s, or ask people in the 1930s, was it ever going to be different? And, you know, was it ever going to change? Would we ever go to the other side of that coin, so to speak? Would rates ever rise? Would they fall? Would the economy would we boom or would we bust? They would always tell you the same thing you're telling me. No one could comprehend how it could happen next. In the late 1990s, none of us on this call could have predicted the internet. None of us would have predicted the economy around the internet. So why, Matt, can't that be the same thing now? You're saying it can never happen. Are you saying that you're now going to call a shot that this time it really is different and that the things which have happened throughout all of history, which gave us the other side of the story, this time it just can't happen ever again? That's what you're saying.
Well, I'm saying the gutting of the customer service industry since the late 90s. I remember in the late 90s being in college, and there were so many customer service jobs I was able to get every summer whenever I needed extra money. They just flowed like water. And a lot of those jobs just don't even they're not going to exist. They've either, if you work in the customer service industry, which again is a very big chunk of jobs out there, you've either lost your job or you're about to lose your job in the next year or two. At the rate they're automating things out,
but Rahul,
the rate they can replace you
Rahul,
with a $50 Android tablet and a wooden kiosk.
But Rahul, aren't there always other opportunities that take the place of the prior opportunities that no one even knew existed? I mean, aren't there things coming that we don't know about yet that will replace?
Right. I mean, there's 3D printing on the rise. But if you want to look at what Matt's talking about, over time we've already gone through phases. Before they used to use the horse, and then came the steamboat, and then steamboat to, I don't know, I mean, was it the cart that came next? I mean, they've always...
Wait, hold on. Was that the evolution? Horse, steamboat,
it wasn't the
car?
I'm just saying...
No. So that's the timeline. Horse, steamboat,
we've always had transition.
Car. Okay.
But the problem with the transition now is that the governments are way too big. We're acting like Europe right now. And when you act like Europe, you don't have jobs. You see a large unemployment rate. And... yeah, I mean, that's what's affecting France and the minorities living in France right now, and also the individuals graduating for college in France. And the United States, you see the same problem. You see all these guys with huge credit.
But which side are you on? Are you suggesting that what Matt's saying is I'm not following your point?
What I'm saying is that if you have a big and large government that is out of control, then if you start losing these jobs, then you're going to have problems. I mean, I'm all for a free market, but we don't have a free market right now.
Okay, but are the jobs going to be replaced, though? Matt says we're not recovering.
We're not going to replace those jobs because we have a government that is way out of control. We don't have a free market.
Okay, so you and Matt agree, and if you and Matt agree on that, then you must not think that rates can rise and that money can flow again, right? I mean, because you have to...
No. I do believe it's going to end up happening. Rates are going to go up. What I'm saying, though, is we live in a different paradigm right now compared to 100 years ago. It'd be an easier transition for those people losing a certain part of jobs back in the day to transition. Right now, you're not going to have that situation because of, how should I say it, a Congress that is anti-business.
Well, that interesting. So, in other words, you're somewhere between Matt and I in this respect. I believe it's going to happen. Matt says it's not going to happen. You believe it will happen, but it'll be incremental. Is that fair?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, something happened today, which I didn't even know was happening today. I talked to someone. I called someone and said, "Hey, did you get my package in the mail today?" And they said, "No. Why would I have gotten your package in the mail today?" I said, "Because I mailed it to you like last week." They said, No. It's a holiday. I said, "It's a holiday? What do you mean holiday? What holiday are you talking about?" They said, "Martin Luther King Day." So it's actually Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I didn't know today was Martin Luther King Day. So without going into a long dissertation on Martin Luther King Day, what are you guys doing to celebrate? Matt, we'll start with you. How are you observing Martin Luther King Day?
I watched an illegal torrent of the Selma movie, which is actually a pretty good movie. That was actually my only contribution, was watching Selma, because I keep seeing these promoted tweets. You got to see Selma. You got to, okay, I'll see it, and I saw it.
So your response to a day in celebration of Martin Luther King is to, I don't know, or the word I would use, just to steal a movie, a fictional account of his life.
But I wouldn't have paid money to see it anyway, so it's not really theft. If it's more like you're walking down the street and the local movie theater, the wall collapses, and you're like, "Oh, I could see in the theater. I guess I'll stand here for an hour and a half."
All right, I'm not moved to tears over your observance. I'll admit to you that's it's not quite as celebratory as I would have expected. Rahul, what'd you do? What did you do? What are you planning to do in celebration of Martin Luther King Day?
I was sleeping in. That's what I did. Just relaxing today.
Am I the only one having a moment of silence and
for MLK?
Heading down to my local civil rights office. Is there a civil rights office and volunteering? Am I the only one.
You do realize that MLK had prostitutes on the side? A story that the media never covered.
You know what's funny about what's funny about what you just said, Rahul, is that I recorded an audio that will be in a video form later today. I'm uploading, describing, it's a little bit about Martin Luther King Day, and I kind of go over that. I refer to the communism and the womanizing and the drugs and all that, except not quite as bluntly as you as you just did, but I kind of go over some of that. So one of you is sleeping in and maybe dreaming about prostitutes, and the other is going to steal a movie.
Here's the thing. The movie does include those elements. Not as graphic, but it doesn't make him look like a perfect saint. It does factor in. So they did
cover it. Okay.
Well, I have to tell you, whenever I talk with you guys, it's always interesting where we go. And this conversation has turned into a movie review, and lucid dreams of wanton sex with wayward women. Everybody, it is Rahul at Alt Investors Hangout, youtube.com/Alt Investors Hangout. It is Panama Orange, twitter.com/Panama Orange. And one more thing, do either one of you, and don't go online and check, I'm just curious, do either one of you know when MLK Day actually began? Now this is an interesting, I didn't know this, but do either one of you know? I just looked it up. Matt, do you know when it was signed into law, when it became an actual federal holiday?
Yeah, I remember when Public Enemy did this video complaining about how it's not a federal holiday, and then I think like Chuck D signed it on the White House lawn afterwards. It was 1991. I don't know. Okay,
1991. And by the way, so just for historical reference, Chuck D signed that into law. I didn't know that.
Flava Flav was co-signed.
Flava Flav was co-signing. All right. Rahul, when do you think it was signed into law? And by the way, don't look. If you look, I'll know from the quivering in your voice.
Well, I have to think this through. I remember Ron Paul said that constitutionally MLK Day is unconstitutional, but he would still support it. So it would probably be when he began in Congress. I would say sometime in the late 1970s.
Wow. I must admit to you, you have a mind like a steel trap. You know why it is, don't you?
Why?
Nah, I was going to say something. I don't know. I thought, that was one of those times I was going to say something that would be funny to you and me. But I realized not enough people would have found it funny in my audience. So I decided I'd back off. I've reined in what I thought would be funny. Rare moment. You're just really smart. So here's the thing. And by the way, that sounds terrible. Like, I don't think you're smart. I think you're very smart. Oh, no. No, here's the deal. You're right. It was 1983 when it was signed into law. I never would have thought that. I would have thought it was sometime in the 90s. It was 1983.
Yeah, because like Public Enemy did that song complaining about it, about Arizona, and they're going to blow up some politician in Arizona because he didn't like MLK, and so. All
right. Well, listen, I want to thank y'all for spending time here with me today at the Chili D Show, chilidshow.com. Everybody go to youtube.com/Alt Investors Hangout. You got to change that name. It's too long, Rahul. And Panama, you need to get PanamaOrange.com before someone else squats on your domain.
I've got a SoundCloud page, Panama. Just go to Google, search.
Are you gonna wait? Are you gonna do it again? Are you gonna? I mean, is this now just gonna be a commonplace thing? Just all of our discussions.
I've got to include my SoundCloud because that's relevant.
You don't have to include, but you don't have to include your SoundCloud. You don't have to.
As the only guru who predicted that shopping malls would become a focal point of civil unrest, and we saw Black Friday, 3 separate malls shut down by organized protests around St. Louis. We saw it again. Mall of America was closed down a few weeks ago for almost a full day, and I'm the only guru that I know of.
That, right?
They say it was George Soros, right?
Wait, hold on. A few things wrong with what you just said. Not wrong. I just want points of interest. First of all, you've glossed yourself with the term guru. I find that interesting. Secondly, the second thing is you describing that people should check out your SoundCloud page because of that is sort of like the Mormon or the Jehovah's Witness who comes to your door and says they want to talk to you about Jesus. I think you're leaving a little bit of the story out, aren't you?
It all ties together, and I think it's unfortunate that the American Sniper movie did not include my testimony as far as the New Orleans part of his.
And in fairness to you, you're serious. You really do think that your testimony would have been wildly important for that movie.
If he actually says he went to New Orleans, went to the top of the Superdome like 2 days after the storm and shot like 25, dangerous looters. I mean, he actually said that. Which
is it possible that you actually know that guy? Could you have met him?
Well, there was a guy in my police academy class who was a Navy SEAL who was a incredibly funny guy. I mean, he's still alive. I shouldn't say was.
But was it this guy?
Huh?
Was it this American Sniper guy?
No. I've known other people.
But is it possible, what I'm asking is it possible that you met him through some of your other, we'll call them engagements?
That's yeah, without knowing who he was, yeah.
That's possible. Okay.
That's, there's, I think the circumstances of his death are very bizarre and very,
You've mentioned that. Now, but it is fair. It is, I think that my the way I've described your description of your SoundCloud page is fair. Also, I think that it is definitely not quite as simple as check out the guru who called for social unrest. It's not like that.
I just think it's amazing that we're actually seeing these organized protests target shopping malls to shut them down. And pull it off. Like the Mall of America has a lot. They've got their own police department.
Hey.
It's not just Paul Blart driving around in his scooter. So that was
Paul Blart, a reference to the movie Mall Cop,
which they're doing a sequel to in Vegas. So I don't know if Greg Manarino is the villain, but that would be. I saw a poster for Paul Blart, and he's driving his Segway through Vegas.
You know what I might do just for this video? I might title this video Greg Manarino Mall Cop. Only because it's funny, and it's not related to anything we've talked about. It's not in any way, and people might see that and think there's something to that. There's nothing. It just sounded funny to me. Greg Manarino Mall Cop. There's the title of the video.
I loved Manarino's work on Welcome Back, Kotter. I forgot the name of his character. I know he was one of the students, but because you got to admit, he sounds like one of the students on Welcome Back. You ever see Welcome Back, Kotter?
I honestly don't know which character you'd be talking about. The only one I can think of is Horshack and that Epstein guy.
One of the main students that sounded just like him. So.
Well, on that note, everybody, you got your work cut out for you. Go find out which character Greg Manarino is represented by best on Welcome Back, Kotter. Rahul, thanks for being here. Anything you want to leave us with, Rahul? Any parting comments?
Don't be stupid like those traders who were short the Swiss franc. Always make sure that you're hedged. Don't leverage 100 to 1.
Would you agree, Rahul, that the euro this week, everyone's expecting it to just crash, and we could see a Swiss franc type, maybe not as violent as the bounce, but if the ECB, if the QE isn't as severe as everyone thinks, the euro could have a crazy volcano bounce?
Yeah, I mean, there needs to be a dead cat bounce. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we see parity of the US dollar to the euro maybe within the next year and a half, but I don't think it's going to go down a straight line. So, yeah, I think you are right. I did see your tweet on Stock Twits that you see a bounce back, and that's what I think McClellan Research does too.
I think that thing can move 1,000 pips because they've been pricing in QE since the euro's been pricing in QE for 6 months in a straight line. I don't.
Right.
Yeah.
I
Who knows though?
I predict the euro lower. I predict the dollar higher, and I predict precious metals prices higher, and I predict that if we could go back in time, this wouldn't be a prediction, I don't guess, but I think if we go back in time, say 10, 15, 20 years ago, and some of us mentioned to the others that we saw each other's tweets, we would not be saying it with a straight face. On that,
that's
probably.
The tweet sounds
On that note, I will hopefully see both of your tweets later. Thanks for being here, Joey D Show. Take care, everybody. Enjoy your Martin Luther King Day, and find something better to do with your time than steal movies and dream of prostitutes. And on that note, I bid you both a fond farewell for the day. Take care. Thanks for being here, guys.
Yep. Thank you.
All right.